Okay, Revelation chapter 17. John writes, then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came to me. Come, I will show you the judgment of the great whore who is seated on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and with the wine of whose fornication the inhabitants of the earth have become drunk. So he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was clothed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her fornication. And on her forehead was written a name, a mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of whores and the earth's abomination. And I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints and the blood of the witnesses to Jesus. When I saw her, I was greatly amazed, but the angel said to me, why are you so amazed? I will tell you a mystery of the woman and of the beast with the 7 heads and 10 horns that carries her. The beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to ascend from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. And the inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will be amazed when they see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come. This calls for a mind that has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. Also, they are 7 kings, of whom 5 have fallen, 1 is living, and the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must remain only a little while. As for the beast that was and is not, it is an 8th, but it belongs to the 7, and it goes to destruction. And the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but they are to receive authority as kings for 1 hour, together with the beast. These are united in yielding their power and authority to the beast, and they will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them. For he is the Lord of lords and King of kings, and those who are with him are called and chosen and faithful. And he said to me, the waters that you saw where the whore is seated, the peoples and the multitudes and nations and languages. And the 10 horns that you saw, they and the beast will hate the whore. They will make her desolate and naked. They will devour her flesh and burn her up with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to carry out his purpose by agreeing to give their kingdom to the beast until the words of God will be fulfilled. The woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth. This is the word of God. And a very powerful and strange word, isn't it? So let's try to understand what's happening here, because Revelation 17, it is one image, but it's a crazy image, right? What do you see in there that sticks out to you? What are some of the things you notice there in Revelation 17? How about the language? How does he refer to it, right? Yeah, the great prostitute, the great, the NRSV calls her the great whore. Like this is some very, very heavy language, isn't it? Why do you think this language is so heavy? What's he doing here?
He's describing the scene.
He's showing them their sins, what they have done. All right. Why would he call her refer to this woman in such a way? Because this is a degrading term, right? Why do you think he's using this language? Because it's the what? Because it's deserved. Okay, yeah, it's definitely deserved. What would cause it to be deserved? What would cause this woman, this image here, to be called this name? Okay, blasphemies. What are blasphemies? What are blasphemies? What is a blasphemy?
Lies.
Something against God. That's a great way to put it, Brother Lewis. Yeah, it's just something that's against God, right? Something that's intentionally against God, but maybe even, I guess maybe another step to add to it would be something that's against God while perverting God's own name or God's own word, right? That's blasphemous. To use, for example, to use communion, which is supposed to bring us together, as a means of dividing people. That would be blasphemous, right? Or to come into a sacred space like the sanctuary and intentionally engage in evil acts, that would be blasphemous, right? Because you're intentionally taking something that's sacred or something that belongs to God, and you're perverting it and you're twisting it into something that is evil or against God, right? Okay, so he calls her a whore, so she's got a lot of blasphemous, and that's a great reason why she's called that. What else do we see? What else is in the image? What's she riding on? She's riding on the red dragon. Is she riding on the dragon, or what is she riding on? What does it say she's riding on? The beast. She's riding on the beast. Remember, there's the dragon and the two beasts. So she's riding on the dragon. But in this one, how does it describe the dragon? What color is this beast? I mean, not the dragon. She's riding on the beast. What color is the beast? Scarlet. All right, that's interesting. What else do we see in there? What is that, Lewis? Blood. We see a lot of blood in this imagery, right? What other things stick out? What other words stick out to you? Blasphemous names, 7 heads, 10 horns. There's a lot of weird imagery here. How would you draw this picture? So if this was a literal thing, which we know it's not literal, but let's try to imagine it's literal. What does it look like? So we got a picture of this beast. Okay. Does it have a saddle? I mean, she's riding it, or is she barebacking it? I don't know. We got this scarlet beast. What does the scarlet beast look like? What does it have? What does it say here? It has 7 heads. All right. And how many horns? But where are the horns at? Wherever they want. Okay. It's a good answer. Right? Doesn't seem to exactly specify where they are. So I don't know if there's like one head that has 10 horns, or if they're split out, one of them gets 3, or there's 2 on the tail or whatnot. So it kind of leaves that part open. And what is the woman that's sitting on the beast? What is she wearing?
Purple and scarlet.
Purple and scarlet dress. And what else? What's she adorned with?
Gold and precious stones.
Gold and jewels. She's got some bling on, right? Some pearls, all right? And then what? Is she just riding, or what? She got a golden cup in her hand. And what's in the golden cup?
Abominations.
Abominations and impurities. And what do these abominations and impurities do? What does it say that they do?
They're things of immorality.
Well, they're definitely against God. They're abominations, they're impurities. But what do? They get the people who drink them drunk, right? Okay, so there's this really cool kind of big imagery here. And this is one of those that begins with this weird picture, but it's fortunately another one where the angel comes forward and says, okay, let me kind of explain this to you, even though the angel doesn't explain it like exactly. Here's what this means. The beast equals Caesar. The woman equals Yoko Ono for breaking up the Beatles, right? He doesn't specifically say who is what. So let's go back kind of the beginning, and let's kind of take this in as one big picture here. Carol Roth says this really well. She says, judgment on those opposed to God begins with the announcement of Babylon's fall and concludes with the final judgment of humanity. This extensive section on judgment includes explanations of evil and calls to escape its grip. It celebrates God's being and actions through Christ with hymns and praise, and it gives assurance of God's righteousness and salvific plan. All right. What Carol Roth is saying that this judgment explains, includes explanations of evil and calls to escape its grip. So what we're going to read over the next few passages, or actually over the next 3 chapters, this is 17, 18, 19, and 20, is this kind of this big old image that God is saying. So this whole part, these 3.5, 4 chapters, they can be taken kind of as one section, as one other part. Like if we were doing a play of Revelation, it'd be an interesting play, right? But this would be next scene. Here's the setup. Here's what we're doing. This is this part that we're focusing on. Okay. So verses 1 and 2, let's go back and kind of walk through this real quick. In verses 1 and 2, one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came to me. Come, I'll show you the judgment of the great whore who is seated on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and with the wine of whose fornication the inhabitants of the earth have become drunk. So he says, come, I will show you. This language is really important because he intentionally puts it in there again. So I'm giving you a little spoiler alert so that when we go to it, we know that he's looking forward and that later we're going to be looking back. But if we go to Revelation 21, beginning in verse 9, one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls, do you see the same language here? Same angel, right? One of the seven angels who had the seven bowls, full of the seven last plagues, again, the same thing, came to me and said, come, I will show you the bride and the wife of the Lamb. And in the spirit, he carried me away to a high mountain and showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God. It has the glory of God and a radiance like a very rare jewel, like jasper, clear as crystal. Okay, so we have two images here. The first one that we're going to study today is the one that we have in 17, where the angel, this one specific angel, comes to John and says, come and I'm going to show you this, right? This angel who had the seven bowls of wrath comes to him and says, show you this. Then again in 21, we see the exact same language, the same angel, the angel had the seven bowls comes to him. And so what John wants us to do when you hear this is to parallel and to contrast these two statements. Because what we see throughout the book of Revelation is this unholy Trinity trying to mimic God, right? Trying to mimic the true Trinity. So he's saying, first he says, come and let me show you, this person, this woman in the desert. And here he says, come, I'm going to show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. They are juxtaposing the two. So the opposite of the woman on the beast would be who? The bride, right? So the bride. So these are the opposites. And so what John's trying to do here is he's trying to get us to see the two differences, to say, oh, we're supposed to look like that, not like that. In the same way that he does the throne room, right? We have Revelation 4 and 5. Here's what it's supposed to look like, but that's what's happening on earth, right? Everything, and even down to the seven letters. Here's how you're supposed to be acting. Here's how you're acting in some of them, right? Okay, so here's the two things. The seven angels, seven bowls, last plague came, said to me, come, I'll show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. In the spirit, instead of carrying me away to the great desert like he does in 17, the desert is the place of trial, right? The place of tribulation, a place that's separated from God. When we see the Exodus, they're in the desert. It's supposed to be a place where you feel separated from God. They're not fully there. In fact, they're not really with God until after Leviticus, when they get the tabernacle and the presence of, and God teaches them how to be holy. And then God fills the tabernacle and Moses can go in and they can start participating with God. So the wilderness is supposed to give us this imagery of being separated from God. Even the passage that we talked about on Sunday, the Jeremiah 17 passage, right? Like a shrub in the wilderness, separated from God, lonely and alone. But here he says, I'm going to take you up to a great high mountain. Who was at the high mountain? What does that remind us of? Moses. Yeah, Moses on the high mountain, right? So he takes me up to this high mountain and he showed me the holy city, Jerusalem. And what's happening? It's coming down out of heaven of God. So here is the bride of Christ, this city of Jerusalem, God's people. Jerusalem in the scripture is the means of saying this is God's people, like the perfect perspective of God's people. There's Israel, and then there's Jerusalem, right? These are God's people. When you hear in the scriptures, pray for Jerusalem, the scriptures aren't saying pray for this city. They're saying pray for these people and represent my people for Jerusalem. So Jerusalem comes down from heaven from God. And we also know this language because who is the bride of Christ? The church, right? So Jerusalem's coming down out of heaven from God. And it has glory of God and radiance like a rare jewel, like a jasper. Remember, how is the woman on the dragon dressed or on the beast dressed? Like she's gaudy, right? I mean, that's the word for it. She's all gaudy, like overly. I got all my bedazzle, my jewels on, my big chalice, right? It's this mockery of the bride of Christ. The bride of Christ has the glory of God and radiance like a very rare jewel, like jasper, clear as crystal. So do you guys see what's happening here? So John's prepping us here to see this juxtaposition, these two different things. Okay. Now the reasons for the judgment against her. So he gives them in here. Here are the reasons for the judgment. Let me go back to Revelation 17. Come, I'm going to show you the judgment of the great whore who sit in waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, And with the wine of whose fornication, the inhabitants of earth have become drunk. So why is she being judged? Why is this woman being judged? What does he say there? Okay, so if we're going to read it literally, she's having sex and getting people drunk, right? But this isn't a literal thing, right? This isn't a person doing this. Remember, in the scriptures, especially when we read the prophets, when God rebukes his people, when he talks about Israel and Jerusalem, in fact, especially when we read Ezekiel, he says, Jerusalem, you're a great whore, right? He calls his people this, and he uses this as imagery in Hosea, right? Hosea marries Gomer, and she cheats on him, and God says, you need to stay with her so you can know how I feel, because this is what is happening. My people are cheating on me. They're like a prostitute, right? And in fact, the language in Ezekiel is very, very harsh. Even I would argue harsher than what you hear here, because in Ezekiel, he calls her not just a whore, but says, you go after men who have phalluses like that of donkeys, right? I mean, they're really plowing after this, trying to degrade them, all their acts of sins into this horrific act. So the reason for judgment against the great whore, first off, is for seducing both the kings and the common people with political, social, and economic power that gives an alternative to God and his will. So she says, look, first off, he says, the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. The kings of the earth, the leaders of the earth, all the leaders of the earth have become a people who are in partnership with her. They've engaged in political, social, and economic power that is giving an alternative to God and his will. Remember, what is the nation of Israel supposed to do? In fact, I guess let me back up a little bit. What is it that God calls his people? Remember, what does Peter say, and what does he call them in Exodus 19? You are to be to me a what? A nation of priests, right? A royal priesthood. So you're supposed to be this royal priesthood to me. You're supposed to be this thing to me. I want you to be a holy nation. I want you to live this way, which is way different than everybody else is doing. And yes, I realize that if you live this way, all your neighbors are going to look at you and go, that is stupid. They're going to look at you the way they looked at Noah, who's building this giant boat thing in the middle of the desert. That's dumb. You're an idiot. Why are you doing that? It makes no sense. And he's saying, I want you to live an alternative life from the world. But instead, these kings, the kings of the world, are choosing to take the name of God, then walk away and get in bed with the woman, with the whore, and instead create kingdoms that offer an alternative life to God. Yeah, could we apply this to the U.S. with the whole everything goes, whatnot? Yeah, absolutely. And this is part of what we're going to get to a little more. This applies to every nation. Period. There's no exception to this. Because in every instance, we begin maybe with this great idea, but we end up creating our own thing and then perverting God's word, if he was ever in it, to make it our own, to do our own thing. So the first off, she's being punished for seducing the kings, but also for seducing the common people. The regular people say, yeah, I love this idea of political, social, and economic power that's giving me an alternative to God. Here's how God says to live, but man, I could live this way. And so now this woman, whatever this woman represents, is being punished for this. Okay, then verse 3 through 6a, we get through the descriptions of it. We hear things like the scarlet beast, right? This beast is scarlet. Well, scarlet, we know from earlier in scriptures, the scarlet is like sin, right? Though I be red like scarlet, he washes me white as snow, right? So we know that scarlet represents this sinful state, but also the scarlet coordinates with the woman's clothing, who later we know is wearing scarlet and purple, right? So her and the beast, they're kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? They complement each other, right? They work well together. They're like, it's funny. Went to the mall the other day, and Trina noticed there was a mom and all her kids, and they were all dressed similarly. Oh, look how cute they're all dressing. This is what's happening, right? She's dressed to match the beast. And that's the imagery they want to see. So this woman, whatever she represents, is dressed to match the beast. And this beast has blasphemous names all over it. Now, it doesn't mean that if you read it, it's got this bad word here and this bad word here and GD here, or whatever it is. What it means is by having blasphemous names is that this beast is trying to usurp God. This beast is claiming self-deification. All over, everywhere that you look, from any position that you're looking at the beast is saying, I'm God. I'm God. And that's blasphemous. To claim to be God is blasphemous. And so however you want to call this beast, whether you want to call it socialism, communism, capitalism, whether you want to call it Taoism, Marxism, Buddhism, whatever, all the isms, all of them at one point or another claim to be God. They claim to have the power for everything that we need. And so they are the blasphemous names. And so this beast is covered with these blasphemous names, with these things that claim self-deification. Okay, we doing all right so far? Now, the woman's wearing purple and scarlet, right? And purple and scarlet are also associated with wealth, with status, right? With royalty. So the woman that rides this beast looks like she belongs, like she has status. She's important. She is this thing. Why wouldn't I follow her? Look how wonderful that is. I would love to have that. I mean, she's the, I don't know if this is right to say it this way or not. She's the Kim Kardashian of the spiritual realm, right? I want to look like that and be like that and follow that and get the lips like that. And whatever it is that's now the big booty's in, right? So whatever it is, like that's this for the spiritual principalities of the world. I cannot believe that I just went there, but I did. Okay, we will move on very quickly. Do you what? The Queen of Botox. Oh my goodness. We best. Okay, and again, the way she's dressed with the gold jewels and the pearls, right? We can compare and contrast with the bride that is the city that we've seen in chapter 21, verses 9 through 11. And then she has this cup. And the cup's explained right away because what's in the cup? Which I think Jessica said it earlier. Abominations, right? Abominate. What are abominations? These are bad things, evil things. This cup is filled with sins that entice. And so the cup that she's wearing is or holding, these are the sins that entice people that will cause us, oh man, that's tempting. Right? And let's be honest, if sins weren't tempting, we wouldn't sin. Right? You know why we sin? Because it's fun. It seems like the right thing to do. It fits in. I'm like, that. No, it's wrong, but man, that. And then it says the woman was clothed purple scarlet, adorned with gold, holding in her hand a golden cup, impurities of the fornication, and on her forehead was written a name. Now hold on her forehead. We keep seeing this imagery of her forehead. What do we discuss that it means to have something on your forehead? Okay, that you're marked, right? Like if I have a big zit on my forehead and I walk into a room, what's the first thing y'all are going to notice? The zit. That's it. I could come up here. If I have a big old giant nasty oozy zit, I'm not even kidding. I come up here on a Sunday morning and I've got a nasty zit. I can see the look on Sienna's face. She's imagining it right now, aren't you? Like it's a nasty zit. And I do that. I can preach the greatest sermon ever preached. You think anyone's going to notice anything? No, what are they going to notice? Oh man, I just want to get up there. And Trina would walk up there and just pop that bad boy. But there is something about popping the zit that just satisfying. Let's be honest. It is, isn't it? Let's focus. Back to you. Thank you. Thank you, my loves. Okay, so the forehead, this is what we see in Revelation. And actually what we see in the scripture, whenever we see things that, okay, marked on your forehead, write this on your forehead, whether it be in the Shema or in 23, where we see the turban, all these things, holy to the Lord, all this stuff. Whenever we see on the forehead is telling us that this thing that's marked on my forehead has a specific purpose. It is my character and my relationship to God. So if I'm marked on the forehead, holy to Yahweh, what does it say about my character, right? It says that I belong to God and everything that I do belongs to God, right? That says something about my character, my relation to God. But if on my forehead is stamped the mark of the beast, what does it say about my character? Then my character looks to the worldly things, and my character looks to these principalities into the world, to these isms that promise me power and security and provision and everything that I need in this world and protection. right? Those things, that's the mark of the beast. That says something about my character, and it says something about my relationship with God. And it may even say, you know what, God, I love you. I've heard good things. Like, I really hope you let me in there when the time comes, on account of I said that prayer, even got baptized once in a Baptist church, once in a Catholic church, once in a Pentecostal church, and once even in a UPC church, just to cover all the bases. So we're good, right? Okay, so I'm going to do that, but I'm going to do this. And so what does that say about my character? My relationship with God is a weak one. In fact, I become like all the people that the prophets talk about in there. You say you're married to God. In fact, you went through the whole ordeal. I'm married to the Lord. I belong to the Lord. I'm a part of the church. I am the bride of Christ. That's what we are saved to be the bride of Christ, right? That's a whole purpose. So I'm saved to the church. I'm a part of that. But you know what? I like to cheat on God. I like to have me some other things on the side. I have my spiritual Sanchos, if you will. And to be fair, we have a nation, a world full of Christians who have spiritual Sanchos. We really do, right? I mean, that'll tweet. I'm going to tweet that. Okay, let's focus. Okay, so then they says she's Babylon the Great, mother of whores and of earth's abominations. So if she is the mother of something, what does that imply? She creates others like her, right? She is the mother. She is the source of these things. She's the source of godlessness. That she creates and influences others like her. Others who are the source of godlessness, who look away from God, who on their forehead is written this mystery, the mother, the whores, the earth's abomination, the mark of the beast. And then I saw that she was drunk with the blood of the saints and the blood of the witnesses to Jesus. What does it mean to be drunk with the blood of the saints? What do you think that means? That she's persecuted the saints and she's celebrating it. So whoever she is, the saints become a victim of this godless life. Now, maybe she does it on purpose, saying, oh, there are them Christians, let's persecute. That certainly happens. That has happened, that is happening, and that will continue to happen. And to be fair, while we do get some persecution in America, we have no idea what persecution is. There are still parts of the world where Christians are martyred in brutal ways every single day. I want to encourage you guys to go follow the Voice of the Martyrs, and you will hear some stories that will just horrify you that have happened in recent years. Martyrs who are Christians who were taken out in the streets, laid out and run over with the steamroller feet first so that the world could watch them die. Can you imagine that? To die that way, the pain that you would go through? Like, this is just ridiculous of what they do to people. Okay, so that's real, but also the blood of the saints, which is to say the victims are the saints, even of this godless life, even when it's not intended. Say, look, I'm not here to hurt the church. I don't care. I'm going to live my life. You live your life. After all, let's just everybody do what we want so long as nobody gets hurt. We've all heard this philosophy, right? Everything's okay so long as nobody gets hurt. But the problem is, what we're saying is, I am able to completely understand the fullness of what's happening and all the repercussions, and I can contain it. But we can't do that. That's ridiculous. That's actually delusional to think that I can do these things and I can control it, I can contain it. And when I do something, even without wanting or intentionally wanting to harm somebody, I harm other people. Anytime I act outside of God's will, anytime I sin, I do not care if I'm on a desert island by myself. My sin brings death into creation. I affect all of humanity. Everybody in the world is affected by my acts. That's why I get frustrated when I hear people say, hey, I'm on my own business, you mind yours. Well, here's the problem. That is my business. That stuff that you do at home that you think is nobody's business, the way you raise your kids, the way you talk to your kids, the way you treat your spouse, the way you handle your money, the stuff you do at home, even the things that you watch that shape the way you speak, those things affect me. Just because you can't see it doesn't make it not so, because check this out. Reality isn't based on what you understand. It simply is reality. And so, yeah, it's my business. And this is where the saints get affected. We are hurt. Innocent people are hurt today. Why is it, if God is good, why do innocent people hurt? Because there's sin in this world. Well, that's not fair. What in the world makes us think that sin is going to be fair? That's the nature of sin. It's unfair. It's chaos. And so she's drunk with the blood of the saints and the blood of the witnesses to Jesus. They're drunk on this. They're enjoying it. This is our life. This is what we do. Okay, we doing all right so far? Breath? Jim? Yes, she is the allure and the desire that people see in governments and everything that we're doing. Absolutely. And the beast is a government system. The beast is even more than that. The beast, remember we talked about the first beast that comes out of the sea is even the principalities behind that, the idea of this. And the second beast that we see on land would be more practical, would be the government systems, even churches, even leadership, local stuff, everything down to this idea of here's how we raise our families, right? The whole, let's let children just kind of do what they want to do. I want to say the hippie thing without picking on hippies, but hey, you know what? The whole hippie idea, I don't know. Okay. We're going to move on because I was picking on hippies, but I love the Bellamy brothers. So it's okay, right? That makes it right, doesn't it? And I do love Cheech and Chong. Okay, but that's because it's also, ethnic. Did you really go there? Totally. Okay. Drunk with the blood. Okay. Verse 6b, 2:8. She's drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the witnesses. When I saw her, I was greatly amazed. But the angel said to me, why are you so amazed? I'll tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast with the 7 heads and the 10 horns that carries her. The beast that you saw was and is not and is about to ascend from the bottomless pit to go to destruction. And the inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will be amazed when they see the beast because it was, and is not, and is to come. So, okay, where have we heard this language before? The similar language. We're talking about God, right? Who was and is to come, the Holy Trinity. So again, we're seeing this parody of the Trinity, but it's not exactly right. There's something that's tweaked. But in this time, he says, who was not, and will ascend. Well, who was not, and then ascended. So let's remember that this is also a parody. So let's start with on the holy side. What holy person do we know was not, and then ascended? Well, Jesus, right? Jesus was alive. He was incarnate. He died. He was not. And then he ascended, right? But when Jesus ascended, what did he do? After Jesus came back to life, then what? Remember, he came back in the Apostles' Creed. We say he went down into Hades, that he went to the place of the dead, right? We get this from Peter, that he went to the place of the dead. He ministered. After 3 days, he came up. And then he what? What did he do after that? Yeah, but what did he do? He ascended to the Father, right? He went up into heaven, where he sits at the right hand of the Father even today, right? So that's, go ahead, Lewis. Yeah, so he tells ladies, he tells everybody what's going on. Yeah, so he does some ministry and all kinds of stuff. So this is the image of Jesus, but in this one it says, he was not, will ascend. And in this one he says, when he ascends, what happens to him? He ascends from what? From the bottomless pit, and then where does he go? To destruction. Wah, wah. It's kind of like this. And then he rises and wah, wah, right back into destruction. So out of the frying pan into the fire. I think that's a pretty good analogy for that one, right? Out of the frying pan into the fire. But the people, here's the crazy thing. The people saw this, and then what happened? They saw the beast that was not, and then was risen up just to be thrown back into destruction. How'd the people respond? Did they respond with, oh, well, that was a fail? No, what did they do? That's awesome. He says that they're amazed when they saw the beast because it wasn't, and it is to come. Because they recognize that God's done this thing. Jesus says, destroyed it. Look, it's still happening. And it's got power. Jesus must be behind this. God must be behind this. This thing must have power. Whatever this thing is that I'm looking at must have great power because it's still here. It's still working. And so the misguided wonder of the beast who brings destruction instead of peace. These people are amazed by this. Also, there's some speculation that the was not, and will ascend. I thought it's worth putting in here. Could be related to the Nero redivivus myth. You guys know what the Nero redivivus myth is? Do you guys know who Nero is? Who's Nero? Emperor Nero. This guy was like the worst of the worst emperors, right? He was a psychotic emperor who just loved torturing people, killing them. He would have people tied to a post, and he'd even dress himself in animal skins and gnaw on them himself. Like, he was just psychotic. And so he committed suicide by cutting his throat. And immediately after committing suicide, this myth kind of went out, this conspiracy theory that he's not really dead, but he's going to come back. And so this is called the Nero redivivus myth. So the thought is Nero's going to come back and claim the throne again. And so all this is kind of happening around this time. And so some of the thought is, okay, well, and John may be kind of helping us, wanting his people to associate this a bit, saying, look, you look to Nero, this ultimate thing of evil. He died, he's not, and you're actually putting your hope in him coming back. You're putting your hope in Rome, in Babylon, in this evil, in this empire, right? And to be fair, when John speaks, he's talking about Rome as the center. Rome is his example. So if John's doing an illustration, if God is using this illustration for the people, Rome is the illustration that he's using, right? So it would make sense to say he was not, and he is to come. And people are expecting, you know what, it's going to come back. Rome's fallen, but it's going to come back up. And we even think that about a lot of the empires. The empire's fallen, but you know what, it's going to come back around and it's going to do great. And when it does come back, that's awesome. It made a comeback. This is how great we are. An example would be, Pastor Kathy brought up, okay, America. We kind of do this in America when we lose our morality. Certainly we become a nation that follows this prostitute, this whore, but also we see this in the way we look at things. Like, for example, our nation is doing great, it's awesome, and then what happens? We have a big fall, financial failures, things go bad, and then you know what? And then it comes back up, and we're like, it was not, but it is going to come back. We're saying, why is it going to come back? Because that's what God wants. And the second we impose God upon it and say, this is God blessing the land, or this is God doing this thing in this nation or using this nation, we start to act upon this beast that was not, and is to come. Because look, I love America, but what's going to happen to America? If Jesus doesn't come back for 10,000 years, do you think America is still going to be here? I mean, I seriously doubt it. There's no nation that's lasted 10,000 years. Right? It's not going to last. It was not, and it is to come. It's going to come, and it's going to be destroyed. It's going to go to destruction, just like every other nation does, because these aren't what God wants. God doesn't want nations. He wants a church. He wants a people who obey him, who live an alternative lifestyle from the world, not try to make an alternative lifestyle from God. Okay, so this here we have, of course, this parody of the Trinity, the was not, will ascend. We did the Nero redivivus myth. Okay, and then 9 through 11. This calls for a mind that has wisdom. And I love this. Okay, good. You're going to explain this to us. What are the 7 heads? And this is where I'm going to explain a metaphor with a metaphor. It's really frustrating. This calls for a mind that has wisdom. The 7 heads are the 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. I thought the woman was on the beast. Also, they are 7 kings. Okay, so are they 7 kings or are they 7 mountains? Of whom 5 have fallen, 1 is living, and the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must remain only a little while. As for this beast that was and is not, it's an 8th, but it belongs to the 7, and it goes to destruction. There's nothing confusing about this. That's clear as mud, right? That just makes total no sense at all. Okay, so let's try to make some sense of this. So if I'm a reader, and he says, let the reader have wisdom. In other words, stop, pay attention. You'll get this if you walk through this. He's saying, I get that this is going to be crazy, but just like the 666, if you pay attention, it'll kind of make sense what I'm saying. Okay, the 7 heads. He says, these 7 heads are 7 mountains, right? 7 hills. Now, if I'm in Rome, or I'm in the 1st century world at this time, and someone says, hey, let's go to the 7 mountains, every single person knows what they're talking about. In the same way that if I said to you, hey, tomorrow, let's all get a trip, let's take a trip and let's go to the Big Apple. Where did I say we're going? Go to New York, right? Everybody knows that. Well, how? It doesn't even look like an apple, does it? I mean, I don't even know if they have apple trees there. Like, why? Still don't know why they call it the Big Apple. But they call it the Big Apple, and we all know that. The same thing, like Rome is known as the city on 7 hills, right? So they know this. When he says there's 7 mountains, they're talking about Rome. It's like saying, and the woman sits on the Big Apple. We're like, ooh, what a burn for New York, right? So this is what's happening here. The 7 mountains on Rome is Rome, okay? So that part we get, okay? 7 heads, 7 hills is Rome. And then, but the 7 heads can also mean 7 kings. Well, what are kings? What have kings represented so far? If I say to you, I'm going to tell you a story about kings and people, what am I telling you? What kind of a story am I going to tell you about? What do I mean when I say kings? Okay, somebody in power, right? And if I'm specifically talking about, if I say something along the lines, I'm going to talk to you about, I want to talk to you about kings and their empires. Okay, well, that's almost clear. What am I talking about? Am I going to talk about nothing specific, but all kings, right? Okay, so kings is a representation of empires throughout history. So he says the 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. So we're talking about Rome. Rome is an empire, but they're also the 7 kings. So he's saying it's this empire, right? Rome is the illustration. He's saying, here's the illustration. It's Rome, but don't get hung up here. Don't think that this is it, that this is all it is, that only Rome is the one that messed up. He's saying it's the 7 hills, but it's also the 7 kings. What does 7 represent? What is 7? Total. It's total kings. It's not just Rome. It's all the kings. It's all the empires. Does that make sense? So the 7 heads are the 7 mountains upon which the horse sits, but it's also the 7 kings. And it actually doesn't even say the. I need to be careful. It says it's also 7 kings because it's not specific to anything. It's just saying it's 7 kings, of whom 5 have fallen. Okay, so we have the 7, this universality of the beast, but then it says 5 have fallen. So if I have 7 and 5 have fallen, if 7 represents empires, then by saying 5 has fallen, 1 exists, and 1 is yet to come, what he's saying is, quite simply, the 5 represent all those that have fallen before it. Every empire, every system built that's inconsistent with God's will have and will always fall, right? So the 5 that have fallen, it's representing everything that's done in the past of all the kings, they've fallen, right? They don't hold up. They don't have a lasting power. He says 5 have fallen, 1 is living. In other words, right now we have kings. We have things happening right now. Of the universalities, a good chunk of them have died, but right now, one of the wholeness is here. We have empires right now. All of the nations are the one that is now. They're still here. So 1 is living. There's always an existing empire. And then he says, and the other has not yet come. Well, 1 hasn't yet come. This is going to continue. Their nations have come. They've fallen. There are nations now. They're going to fall just like them. And after these fall, there's more that are going to come. This is what we do. It's almost like this tragic, vicious circle we're stuck in. This is what humanity does. We create empires over and over and over again. It's the one thing that's been consistent through history, right? We create empires. He says, but this one's going to fall and he must remain only a little while, which is John's way or the scripture's way of kind of saying, look, the end is nearer than it was. It is nearer than it was. I look what Paul says, right? The end, right? Christ's return is coming. It's soon. The dawn is approaching. I love that Paul can say the dawn is approaching. He doesn't mean it's going to be here in a minute. It's going to be here in an hour. It's approaching. Here's what I know. There is a distance between now and the time that Jesus is going to come back. There is. Let's do some math. Let's call that distance X. Right? For Christos, we're going to call it Chi. Right? Does verse 10 corroborate verse 8? Yeah, the beasts are the systems, and the systems lead to the empires. Right? I have this idea, this beast, the way to fix things is to create a structure that looks like this. And so we create an empire. Someone might say, like Stalin would say, the structure looks like this kind of totalitarian rule, and he creates an empire. Hitler would say, the structure to save humanity looks like this, and he tries to create an empire, right? And everybody, the founding fathers of America say destruction, this was their whole goal. The structure to save the world looks like this, and they create an empire. It's what we do. We create empires based on the beast. So the five have fallen, the ones living, ones yet to come, but the end is near, and it was. If the end of the time, the time between now and Jesus coming back is X, then tomorrow, the time is X minus 24 hours, right? It's getting smaller, is all he's saying, that it's getting smaller, whatever it is. And then he says, but as for the beast that was and is not, it's an eighth, but it belongs to the seven and it goes to destruction. And now it comes back to what Jim had just said. He says, the one that hasn't come, the eighth, this is the beast. And how do we know it's the beast? Because it goes to destruction. He just said the beast is what goes to destruction. The eighth is the beast, and it goes into destruction. What is the beast? The beast isn't the empire itself. The beast isn't one of the kings. The beast is the principalities upon which these kings exist, right? It's this, here's what I need to do. This beast gives me an idea. This is how I save humanity. This is how I bring order from the chaos. This is how I protect myself and the things that I love. This is how I give myself purpose. I look to the beast to create these principalities, these structures. And so in the end, what he's saying is not only are all these empires going to fail, but the very beast by which it is also the eighth. And to be fair, he says it's also one of the seven. He's saying this principality is embedded in every one of the nations. And it too is going to fall and be destroyed. It goes into destruction. Okay, does that make sense so far, the sevens? Right, they're kind of clear as dirty water, right? A backwashed glass of water from a 3-year-old eating a hot dog, right? That's actually pretty hard to see through, huh? All right, as clear as Los Baños tap water, right? I can kind of see through it, but I'm not going to drink it. Oh, it does follow. Now we're getting sidetracked. Okay, then but then he talks about the 10 horns. Do you guys remember what horns represent? Power. Perfect. Horns represent power. I got cuernos, bro. Right? Okay. So I got horns. It represents power. And what does 10 represent? Who remembers what the number 10 represents? It also represents fullness. Right? The completion of stuff. It's not like the 7, like completion, but 10 it represents the fullness of something. Where 7 is the perfect representation of everything, 10 is the fullness of something. Does that make sense? Okay, so they have 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who've not yet received. So the 10 horns represent this completeness of power. They have power. And to be fair, our empires have the complete power that we have in this world. Everything that God has given to humanity, what have we done? We pour into our empires. And this is the image that he's trying to give them. He says they have this power, but they're to receive authority as kings for 1 hour, which is to say what? It doesn't mean that this is going to happen, count the clock, it's going to be 3,600 seconds. He's saying this is going to be just a short period of time. They don't have power for long. How long do empires have power? Not real long. Right? In the big span of things, nations don't stay nations very long. He says their time is limited, which reminds us the true power comes from God. And this is why if their time is limited, then how much power do they really have? Not a whole lot. True power comes from God. But what does God do with this power in the creation? God takes his power, and what does he do with his image? Puts it upon us. And what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to take the power, just take all authority, right? Take this image of God, reflect it back into creation. So God gives us power. He gives humanity, all humanity, power over creation. We're supposed to be here as stewards of the earth, reflecting God's image into it. So God gives us power. And instead of taking that power and using it in a way that glorifies God, we take that power, and then what do? We yield it to the beast. He says, these are uniting and yielding their power and authority to the beast. God gives all of humanity power, and then we create this imaginary beast, and we say, oh, the beast, it's got this great idea. All this power that God gave me, I give to you. Here, beast, take my power. And to be fair, every single empire in the world gets its power from where? From humanity, from people. will say, and every empire will make the claim that it's from some kind of a higher power or something, right? This was created by Muhammad, created this, or God wanted to create this land, or this power created this. But at the end of the day, every empire gets its power because humanity yields the power that God gave them to the empire. That's not what we're supposed to do. We're not supposed to give our power to the empire. Our power goes to the church, to the people, to the world. So the ultimate goal then of each empire is to conquer the Lamb. Because now if my power that I'm receiving from God comes from me and I give it to the empire, now I want you to think of who's the main bad guy in Aladdin. What's his name? Jafar. Yeah, Jafar, right? Jafar, okay. Right? Jafar, you have all the power in the world, but there's still somebody more powerful than you. There is. I'll always be second best unless I become the genie himself. And so what happens eventually? So he has all the power he wants, but at the end of the day, he needs more. He has to take the genie's power. I love that because it's a great metaphor of reality. No matter how much power we have, we want more. And if someone's giving me power, if I'm getting everything from Lewis keeps giving me all of his money, like I'm a store. Lewis is giving me all of his money. I'm like, that's awesome, but I need more. Where are you getting your money from, Lewis? Well, I'm getting it from the VA, what little bit they're paying me, right? Or whatever it is, right? The government or all this stuff, or my job, or whatever it is, wherever anybody's getting their money, say, well, I'm gonna go hit them up. I'm gonna sell to them because I want the source. I want more and more, and I want it all, and I want it all. And the same thing happens with nations. We get our power from people, but eventually we want to take over God because we want the power from there. And so even without realizing it, every empire tries to destroy God and take him on to take his power. And to be fair, listen, this is where we need to be really careful. And I want to be careful how I say this because I love this nation. I think this is the greatest nation on earth. I love America. Okay, I do. I love this country. But the first step to taking the power from God is claiming to be in partnership with God. Well, God's with us. God works with us. And hear how people talk, right? God, country, and family. And what do we, I hear God and country all the time. We bring those two together like all of a sudden they're married. And that is the beginning of the next step of a nation that doesn't realize is trying to usurp God's power, even to take it, to claim that this is God's. If you walk into the Capitol and you look up in the middle of the Capitol building, there is an image, a religious image that declares that this is sacred ground. And so we need to be very mindful of these things. Okay, so the time is limited. True power comes from God, but it's yielded to the beast. And the ultimate goal of the empire is to conquer the Lamb. They conquered the slain Lamb, the cruciform Christ, and the true lasting King. But does it work? No. Okay, then very quickly, 15. And he said to me, the waters that you saw where the whore is seated are peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. So here we have fourfold. Remember the four seraphim around, right? It represents all of creation. Again, so this fourfold description emphasizes the universality into humanity. That she's on everything, every person, people. Nobody is exempt from this. And they will hate her. So eventually, evil turns upon evil. If you refer to Ezekiel 23, you're going to find the same thing, right? Evil turns upon evil. And then he leaves her desolate and naked, and they devour her flesh. And this points right back to Jezebel from 1 Kings and from 2 Kings, right? I'm going to let her flesh be devoured by the dogs. And so this is meant intentionally to kind of point right back at Jezebel. And then finally, God allows them to destroy themselves through their self-destructive nature. God has put in their hearts to carry out his purpose by agreeing to give their kingdom to the beast until the words of God will be fulfilled. So they destroy themselves. I'm going to give all I am to the beast till it kills me and the beast consumes me, and everything kind of implodes upon itself. So God allows them to destroy themselves by their self-destructive nature. Their self-destructive nature is attacking each other, and then worse than that, attacking the Lamb. Well, that was stupid. And then the woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth. The great city in this time, of course, is Rome, which is a representation of Babylon. These are human-made institutions throughout history that seek to replace God. I want to read you what Michael Gorman says. He says that Babylon makes promises, demands, and claims that are appropriate only for God to make. it sacralizes, even divinizes its own power, and then it requires absolute allegiance to that power. As soon as a nation starts to divinize its power, it's stepping into the role of these empires, of these beasts. And it always happens. It's going to happen. Okay, any final thoughts or questions? Go ahead.
Go with this, except when I was reading the habits of the earth, whose names have not been written down in the book of life. I had a question. Somebody asked me, once your name is written down in the book of life, can it be crossed out?
Okay, once your name is written in the book of life, can it be crossed out? Now remember this, the book of life isn't a literal thing. There's not, God doesn't sit up there and he's got a book. Let me check the book and see what's there, right? These are metaphors tell us the book of life, that God is representing this thing, right? So all it means is, are you written in the book of life? Are you one who is saved by God? Are you going to be a part of the resurrection? Are you one of God's people? Are you in the citizenship register? Right here in the church, we have a membership, a register. In the cities or even in the nation, they have a register that registers every citizen. Every one of us is registered, and we all come with this cool 9-digit number, right? That we have to use for everything that we do. So we're all registered as citizens, written somewhere. And so God uses the same kind of language just for us to understand it. So the real question is, can salvation be lost? And according to Paul, Romans 11, yes, it can. We're grafted into the tree. And if God would cut out those branches that were natural to it, how much more would he cut out those that are unnatural if they continue to sin against God? So yes, it can be blotted out of the book of life. All right, let's pray. Lord, I love you and I thank you. And I pray, Father, that you would find us serving you, that we would never give up the power and the authority that you've given us, but Father, instead we would use it to be your church, to be your people, to live the holy life you have called us to. For us, your bride, your true bride, to be an alternative to the world, so that they would be able to see you and know you, that we would reflect your life and your love back into creation. Bless us, Father, in all that we do. Protect us. I pray this in the name of Christ. Amen.